We are specifically here to contribute. We are specifically here to recognize that we're in this rowboat together. And workplace visuality is about making the workplace speak. That is coterminous with continuous improvement, but it's much more refined. We have a compulsion to continuously improve, and it has nothing to do with making our boss happy. It is for us, each human, as our art. It is internal touch, which we unknowingly give away when we drive towards a fully digital enterprise. It is a colossal mistake. The devices are there to hold our intelligence so that our intelligence is coterminous with our work.
Hi, welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If this is your first time listening in, welcome. We are so happy to have you join us. Our mission here is simple: to improve companies and improve careers through continuous improvement. We're here to share inspiring and interesting stories from individuals who have embarked on the path of continuous improvement. Through interviews with leaders, innovators, and change makers, we explore the sparks that ignite transformative journeys, both within organizations and in personal and career growth. So whether you're starting out or looking to take your improvement efforts to the next level, this podcast is here to guide, inspire, and empower you. I am your host, Keith Norris, and our guest today is Dr. Gwendolyn Galsworth. Gwendolyn is one of my favorite experts in the world of continuous improvement. Dr. Galsworth is a faculty fellow and lifetime Academy member at the Shingo Institute and author of 7 books, including Work That Makes Sense, Visual Workplace, 2 of which I have right here. Well used, by the way. Gwendolyn now lives in Europe and works with companies all over the world. When she's not on client side or writing new books, she can be found hiking. I love that. I love to be outside myself. And I must be among your biggest fans. If there is a Gwendolyn Galsworth fan club, I need a membership. I'm a huge fan of your work, and it brings me so much joy to have you on our podcast here today and introduce you to our audience. So where are you at today?
First of all, thank you, Keith. I am really delighted to be with you and connected with your audience and the kind of people who find what you talk about is important to them too. I am in Ireland. I went to Europe in 22, went to Poland on a consulting assignment to help consultants there learn about my work and do my work. That was very interesting. I left about a year ago, just about a year ago, and I moved to an English-speaking country. I don't speak Polish, and it's interesting the kind of psychological deficit that one can feel when you actually cannot hear and understand just conversations on the bus, easy conversation with the Uber driver, walking down the street, really made a huge difference. And I needed to get back into a context that I understood the kind of the minutia of being alive in a foreign country. So I spent about 6 months in the UK and England, which looks really good to me. But right now I'm in Ireland. I'm doing work in the Netherlands and also in Ireland. And people seem to be very interested in visuality pretty openly and with great curiosity. They are ready to discover things that they don't know.
That's awesome. It's a wonderful place. So, Gwen, we like to start our podcast off with something we call the spark. And the spark usually is something along the lines of, how did you get your start into continuous improvement? And I know that you've got a journey that we could probably spend hours talking about, but is there a moment where you remember feeling like this is my life's work?
Yes. Yes, it was exactly a moment. I was taking my second study mission to Japan. This was in the 84, 85. That's 1984, 85. And I had previously been an actor in New York. My claim to fame was Bob De Niro and I got fired from the same acting company. And previous to that, I was a Latin teacher. Um, because my I said, "Pop, what should I be when I grow up?" And he said, "Be a Latin teacher." And I said, "Okay." I had no idea how one becomes anything. And I attempted to get my master's in language for the hearing impaired because I was very interested to know, what is it? How do we connect and communicate when we don't have spoken language, when we really have to express? And in fact, it was my ambition to work with the hearing impaired to do theater that was expressive of an internal understanding that did not depend on words and not sign either. I found myself leading a study mission to Japan, working with a brand new company that was bringing information from Japan. And I was at a final assembly plant in Toyota, leading a study mission and not really having a leader's mind because I was learning so much. And there was an index line in final assembly, the part of the line where the tire is being set onto the final chassis and held down with 5 lug nuts. Operator on this side and operator on the other side. It's an index line, meaning it is not just tack time driven. It's like the line indexes every X number of minutes plus seconds, and you better have your job done. And I'm just watching this, they're doing their work, and the line goes chunk, and the whole thing moves forward. I was watching the operator on my side, and he was using an impact wrench. This is the exact moment where I said, "Oh my God." No background whatsoever in visuality. The visual workplace did not exist as a form at this time. The operator is doing the 5 lug nuts with his impact wrench. The line indexes, and while the line index, he puts his impact wrench into a bucket of pink powder. I didn't notice it the first or second time. I was just kind of hanging out, but I noticed it the third time and I thought, why is he doing that? Because when he pulled it out, it was covered with pink powder. And I thought, that's very messy of him. I didn't even know how to describe it. And then he did his stuff. And of course, what I saw was that the big question for him, because he knew his job, was, have I done all of them? Or if you want to flip it, which ones have I done? Because the pink powder got on the lug nuts. So he knew at a glance when he didn't do it. But as I watched, I also, because he sneezed, and I saw him go back to the exact right lug nut, the one that he hadn't done yet. So if the line didn't index, he would know it wasn't him, it was somebody down there, or somebody somewhere. And my mind grokked this long before I was able to use words. I spent the last 35 years putting words to what unfolded from that event. And what unfolded, which I have words for now. I use this particular sequence. I just used it in Holland 2 days ago so that people understand that a visual device is holding information physically that we would otherwise need to hold in our mind or hold as a reminder or be checklist about or be micromanaged about. But that gentleman and his impact wrench had already forged a partnership that enabled both of them to maximize the job that they'd been given because they were working together, that the informational landscape was populated with that gentleman's need to know on the spot. And the 2 primes that came out of that, which are subtly different. Prime 1 is to tell merely by looking. That's prime 1. And that is the purpose of the visual workplace, to tell merely by looking. Prime 2 is to tell the difference merely by looking. Huge, huge difference in prime 1 and prime 2. And it just got me started, and I fell in love. Every now and again, something happens where there's a connection where you say, my gosh, I have a gift. And it has something to do with that thing because I've never felt like this before. You fall in love. I've never felt like this before. And I have been endlessly interested in this for more years than I will say on tape. But it's been a very, very long time. I've never fallen out of love. I never got tired, never got bored. It's my thing.
I love that about this discipline. I use this phrase continuous improvement, but there's so many variations, tools in the toolbox. I'm interested to understand how you see that world of OpEx or continuous improvement, maybe like the categories or the language that you might use, because there are so many layers to.
Well, in fact, I do not identify with the world of continuous improvement. I don't take that nomenclature as descriptive of my work. The methodologies are yet to be named of continuous improvement. What I see is a strategic intervention that's called visuality, a subset of which is visual management. And workplace visuality is about making the workplace speak. That is coterminous with continuous improvement, but it's much more refined, much more focused, much more, it is measurable in and of itself.
I'll use this word taxonomy, right? To like put things into
Yes.
their places and their category. And it is the subject of what is continuous improvement and what is lean. Is it a project? Is it a program? Is it a philosophy? There's so much discussion and debate on social media, for example, as well as just in the discipline. So I am curious about your taxonomy, the language, the words that you use to describe these different things. If I was to ask you who is your work for, like the stuff that you do, who would you expect to be most interested in this kind of thing?
What you were saying before about continuous improvement being all things to all people, but there's no foot it doesn't fit. It's a shoe that fits everyone. We have inside of us, because of brain function, not just the capability of continuous improvement, but the imperative. It has to do with brain function. So we have a compulsion to continuously improve, and it has nothing to do with making our boss happy. We have a compulsion towards excellence, and it has nothing to do with being competitive. It is for us, each human, as our art. It is internal, and we express ourselves in excellence. And the workplace, CEOs and people with resources are responsible for making that natural ability be utilized and even amplified in the workplace. Getting back to who. So my work has a visual expression. It is a language for the eyes. We could also say it is a language for and of the senses, because in fact, we are visual beings, but the big picture is sensory beings. We draw information and energy and connection through all of our senses. If we are sight deficient, the other senses take over. Helen Keller is the premier example of that. She was the author of 17 books. She couldn't see, she couldn't speak, she could barely hear. What did she have left? She had taste, she had smell, she had touch. Touch, which we unknowingly give away when we drive towards a fully digital enterprise. It is a colossal mistake. If we are sensory beings and we deprive the workplace and the thinker of touch, we take away a major resource of information. So the visual workplace, broadly put, is an informational intervention. Work is a landscape of information. It is a landscape of layers of information, but most of the time you have to dig for it. It is not a workplace that speaks, that offers the information when and as you need it so you can pull it to you. But visuality is a pull system. The devices are there to hold our intelligence so that our intelligence is coterminous with our work, and we can be smart with the pull of a solution that we have pre-designed in the workplace itself, whether that's an office, that's a biomedical lab or process, hardcore manufacturing, hot rolling steel mills, which are just amazing. Any place where work is done, any place, hospitals, of course. The immediate receiver or connector to my approach, my discoveries on visuality is I. But funnily, not this I, but this I, the person. I call it I driven. I driven from the sense of I have a need to know. What do I need to know right now that I don't know in order to do my work? What do I need to know? That's one of the two driving questions. What do I need to know that I don't know right now in order to do my work? I notice what I do instead of my work. And in my system, that's called motion, moving without working. And it has many discrete forms. One of the easiest ways to really understand what motion is to understand that questions are a form of motion. Repetitive questions or questions that are simply trying to remember. Can you help me remember? I don't exactly know how to do this. We'll ask our buddy, we'll ask our operator. I mean, yes, our buddy, or we'll ask our supervisor, but sometimes we don't ask at all because we figure there's some kind of a deficiency in us that I've been here for 17 years and why am I asking this question again? But by the same token, that need to know is why am I asking you again for an answer when I already know that you know it? Why the heck don't you share it with me? And Visuality said, da da da. The second question is the we question. What do I need to share that others need to know, that I need to share so they can do their work, so they can do it more completely, more correctly, more on time, more safely? So they can do the dance of work and just work and flow, because we know that flow at work is a very high state of connectivity that will release other resources in our biosphere, in our neurosphere. A body at flow is a body at rest, and that we will contribute more at rest. Stress has its place, but not 24/7, 365 days a year. So the recipient of my system, the system is draped entirely around the eye in terms of, and I want to just cut this off right at the pass because there will be people who are listening will say, I can't do that. I don't have 70 employees. I have 7,000. So now we have the horizon, which is what Visuality is about, the what, and below the horizon is how do you implement it? And that takes some artistry and it takes some frameworks. Those are all built in now because I was the queen of failures in these early 90s. But then I began to listen to my customers and I began to see that they had certain kinds of difficulties in implementing. All of it is work. All of it is discovery and learning. And all of it is very rewarding, but you have to spend the time on the front side.
You mentioned something a minute ago about how this thing, broadly continuous improvement, which I agree with you that there's something inside of us that requires it. It's like part of our DNA, it's part of our evolution as a
That's right.
species to continue to get better. And I love that this discipline that is a professional discipline, when companies get it right, there's a great synergy between what's good for the person and what's great for the organization. You've used a phrase I've heard on some of your podcasts, the hero within. What I'm referring to is one of the audio podcasts maybe that I listened to where you talked about a concept. I think you called it the hero within. And it
Yeah.
was this idea that inside of every one of us, there is this hero that is wanting to improve, wanting to make things better, wanting to make sense out of things. And for me, that resonates as a truth because I think not everybody is working in a job that they love, but I think that every human would prefer to work in a job that they love and one that makes sense. So there's this gap between what a lot of people experience at work with what some, you might say, lucky people experience at work. The reason why I think this is inspiring is because I feels like, hey, if you're struggling with something at work, there might be a better way. Like you might be destined for something more, something great. You might be having your own little moment of this isn't right. There has to be a better way. And I'm serving this up as like, I think Gwen has some of the answers to solve some problems to help you serve that hero within, you might say.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a very good understanding. And the story that you told around it is a story that is quite common. And it's a sad story. And that is people come to work and they do the work. And instead of helping them express and grow, they grow dead. And sometimes the only excitement, sort of like taking a pencil and sticking it in your eye just to feel alive, is that they'll begin to fight or they begin to be grumpy or they begin to find fault. Because I believe what you believe, which is that we are given life as a gift, as a gift. And to get to the gift, you got to unwrap it and get it out of the box and see what it is. And that's called our journey. You have to see what your life is. They used to talk about it as a small voice. You listen to the very small voice that says, yes, 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 no, not that. Yes, yes. You know, and we aren't, especially in the United States, we aren't given that training. I have a friend who went crazy the other day. He was saying how much he loves to meditate. Well, good, I'm glad. I do too. He said, "Why don't we teach this in kindergarten? Just ask the kids to be quiet for a minute and just listen. Listen." Just get used to some stillness within them, and I thought, "Oh, go guy, go." He's a very, very experienced pilot on Delta, really just a superb human being, and he has had such a connection with this that he wants to spread the word. We are specifically here to contribute. We are specifically here to recognize that we're in this rowboat together and to make a contribution, and you can see people today experimenting with that form in ways that were triggered in our history 40, 50, 80 years ago, but now are getting much more active and way they're experimenting with where the edges are. We have to recognize that we're trying to figure it out because enough of us has had the experience of feeling that connection, of feeling the hero within, feeling that resource to not want to give it up anymore, to not be an unheard voice, to not be a robot. This is something else that came up in Holland. People were talking about, we don't want to be a robot. And I thought, oh boy, no, no one said you should be. What happened? What happened? What's going on here? So it's very current. But when I wrote that, uh, a great teacher of mine had read the first page of the Charles Dickens book, David Copperfield. And in that first page, David is walking along the beach. He's young. He's like 17, 18, and he's thinking about his life. And the third sentence in this fat book says, "Will I be the hero of my own life?" You can take that and say, that's a call to action for every CEO, every CI manager, every marketer of our company. Do we help people be heroes? Well, if we are helping them be heroes, then we have to give them enough downtime, enough silence, enough margin for them to relax into, because that internal resource needs room to grow. And man, is it worth it. This idea of hero within is the I. It is the I. I
So
want the CEOs to feel their own power and their own command. I want them to feel like great leaders. And we have developed a way through Visuality for them to be very clear, for them to do the two things that leaders must do. I'm talking about executive leaders and then cascade it down. But the executive leader is in charge of the corporate intent. The executive leader's job is to decide and drive, to decide and drive.
so let me ask you a question about the differences between the role of a manager versus the function or role of a leader. Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting. This is exactly this is what we're currently doing with Obeya, because so many Obeyas, which is a room full of measures, it just means a room, and on the wall you have all your measures. You're supposed to have line of sight, but metrics are the perfect element in your production system to make that distinction between decide managing. Managing is a peacetime activity. It's for stabilization and it's for not rocking the boat. You manage it. You keep things steady, on the go, steady, bump, bump, bump. Leadership, you can think of as a wartime activity. You can think of Churchill. You can think of Roosevelt and all of the heroes on our side of the Second World War, because there was a lot in that war that needed to be managed. Logistical material chain, there's a whole supply connection with the front and everything in between. But the leadership was leadership under extreme pressure to make the right decision, not just to figure it out, but to actually decide and move forward with commitment, conviction, and material. I've seen so many Obeya sessions that are managed. It's basically project management, and it's basically going back to the same metrics and saying, and how are we doing on this? And how are we doing on that? And how that? Let's have the action item. This metric moves up a bump. But the leader says, got to make sure we're measuring the right things. because we're going to put energy into this.
I really like that concept, and I'm thinking about so many scenarios that come to mind, but I want to just double back on that a little bit. So in this leader role, you've got this metric that's maybe missing or this assignment to develop these metrics. I've also heard you mention this like work by yourself concept when speaking about the X matrix, right? So let me just ask you to clarify that a little bit, like this scenario where the assignment is to work alone as opposed to work with a group or your team.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's scary. I do a lot of work on my own, and when I ain't got nothing, you know what I do? I swear to God, this is my first book. When I ain't got nothing, I reach for my favorite books and I just read the first 2 paragraphs of every chapter to see if something is set up in a way that those authors had about setting up their proposition. Just in the English words that they used were so helpful because one of the things that we learn to do, one of the things that you must teach is you must teach people how to flip. Great debaters do this. They take a proposition, you let them argue the pro, and then you say, okay, now you have to argue the con. I'm not going to tell you which one you're going to do on Thursday, but be ready for either one of them. So we have to really penetrate the logic and ask ourselves one of the most important questions: are these true binaries? If they are, we handle them one way, but you have to first poke at them. They may be false binaries, like the binary between digital versus or virtual digital versus actual physical, for digital boards and all that. It's a false binary. And people, they think they have to decide between the two. Well, no, you don't. So that whole area of critical thinking is part of what you as a consultant and I as a consultant, we are required to teach the people who entrust their company's future for a year or the first quarter or whatever to us, to test them to see if they are thinking widely enough and also with great precision.
Drill down on that. You said, I think the phrase you used was teach them to flip. And I think you were talking about that in terms of, was that like debating the other side of a decision?
Yes,
Is that what
flip the
you're?
thinking. And we do that a few ways. We do that a few ways. This is part of our below the horizon in order to build people's strength. It might be a more mature, it might be on the leadership level, but I've used this with operators many, many times, but not until they start feeling their own strength. And you know that an operator is feeling his or her own strength when they get very mean to you and they push back and you say, oh, I want to thank you very much. So the flipping, so one of the things that you can do, you do this with your clients and you'll see it work. They'll say something and you may even say, bingo, I've been waiting for that. All right, John, I want you to tell me what the opposite of that is. What do you mean? I told you there'd be a day when I wouldn't give you everything you needed. So I'm just gonna say, I want the opposite of that. And if hopefully there'll be someone else in the room other than you, and you can say, speak to Roy about it. What's the opposite? So I'm sorry, this is really microcosm of what has to happen for critical thinking. You have to establish flow at the beginning of the session, and you have to establish flow horizontally between people in the room so they can turn to their partner and feel safe. And if there are many in the room with this, somebody take the pro side, somebody take the con side. This is done in debating all the time. Now switch. We're going to take a break and I'm going to ask you to switch. But we also say if in solutions, especially for chronic complex problems, you make a solution, I want 4 more. I want 4 more solutions that are equally robust. I want them by Thursday. Because people will become satisfied with the solution because it seems to solve, but it's not worth deploying it if it hasn't been vetted and tested and poked. Ono said it beautifully. He said, people don't come to Toyota to work. They come to think. People come to the company I'm responsible for to think. And my job is to give them that opportunity. Wouldn't that change things?
You mentioned, you brought up Toyota and everybody loves to, model things after Toyota. I know you've got a lot of experiences. Are there a few things that people most often get wrong when they're trying to imitate Toyota in their approach to whatever they want to call it, lean, the Toyota production system?
What I would say about Toyota is that the reason that I use them, I knew them back in the 90s and in the 80s when they were just interrupting the world of the West and our approach to manufacturing quality and everything. Everything that I quote comes from a period where their internal motivation was very pure and uncorrupted and inspiring, not necessarily transportable directly to the West, but still these nuggets were astonishing. And I was really formed by my experiences there, both my working with Shingo. Shingo was my sensei. I worked with Fukuda, who was a quality leader at Sumitomo. But when you're around these men, you listen to them, and then you listen to what's underneath. And Shingo was a complete maniac. He was a bulldog that liked to bark. He created sufficient internal stress for him to turn everything into an emergency. He's what I call a barracuda leader. He was just always hungry for lunch, and lunch was improvement. He and Ono were trying to save the country, the whole country. They had no resources. And out of that stress and dilemma, and that need, came some very large ideas that had inspired me. And that's what I use. That's the part that I use on Toyota.
So I think that there's some advice in there for let's say somebody who's working in this improvement discipline in one form or another, and they're helping stand up a program or helping implement, your work or some version of this improvement. What advice do you have for them?
I'm going to talk about a piece that's missing in most cases, I think. Some companies do it really well. They don't do it this way, but they do it, get this condition in place. You have to give your operators a chance for an unmitigated success without criticism, something that makes them feel powerful, something that allows the scale, the imbalance of power distribution to begin to right itself. I'm not talking about you giving away any of the power you have as an executive or a consultant or anything like that. We use some simple devices. We call it the 7 soft skills. And there's a group of skills that you use, especially when you work with operators, but you also use them when you work with a CEO. But it's easier. I won't go there. The center, the anchor center, the anchor element is create flow. So your job in working with operators is to create flow. That means that when you come into the presence of an operator, your heart has to be opened and you have to say hello. And you have to say hello and keep your mouth shut and just say hello. Maybe stretch out your hand. You've got to connect. You've got to create that connection. So that's very, very simple. And people who do Gemba walks know about this now, consulting behaviors or collaborative behaviors. The other thing that you have to do that's very immediate is that you have to teach with no answers. You have to ask open questions that don't have answers. Now, what we do, and I'm not talking about Gemba walks because the dynamic is slightly different, but in the classroom, is that we'll ask a question. We'll have a visual device on the wall and we'll say, okay, I want you to look at that device. I want you to tell me how it works. Like the pink powder. That's exactly what I did on Wednesday. And they were all senior directors and whatever, but they were like, oh, what do you mean? Well, you'll figure it out. Talk to your neighbor, one other person, and figure out what's that just went on there. And then the room begins to blah, 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 because they're creating flow this way. I mentioned it before, the horizontal flow. For operators, many times, the operator is finding their voice for the first time. They're putting sentences together for the first time. They're being an adult for the first time. They're thinking for the first time this day, they're warming up. They're trying things out. They're learning from their person sitting next to them. They've got something to say. First few times you do that, that means first session, second session, you'll have to say, okay, I need to hear from someone. I'm going to call on someone. Your name begins with a B. I'm about to call on you. There are 5 Bs in this room. Are you ready? Bob, come on, Bob. I was listening to you. You already said it. Tell us. And then that person, and then you just charm people. You don't put them on the spot. You welcome them. You listen. I'm talking about charm. You love them, and you have to find that. Your heart has to be opened. We know when someone's heart is open the moment we are moving towards them. And if your heart isn't open, you got to learn how to do that. Okay, so that's your job. So teaching without answers gives your operators a chance to find their own power. It's there, but they kind of lost track of it. So I just want to give that as a very simple, those are the 2 first steps. They have to do with your behavior and your ability to break that wall. You are absolutely, we say this to trainers and consultants, you are 100% responsible for the flow of the session. And if there is no flow, take a break, pull yourself together and find it. But you cannot proceed without flow. You need to figure out what that means. They get a chance to watch us on our feet so they can feel the flow. It becomes something that we actually talk about, the field and the flow, because there's no learning without it. There's no discovery. There's no connection. So do you see, we never talked about these things 20 years ago. I would be told not to come back because it would be too weird. But now, we can talk about what is invisible because people are beginning to value it. We are in a wonderful time. We're hitting a rough spot right now, but we are in a time of great liberation and great illumination. We just have to wake up to the parts of it that we can move and then figure out what to do with the rest.
The phrase you use, teaching without answers, that sounds to me a lot like maybe one way of doing that is asking questions. You and I have had conversations about the power of certain questions. What are some of the favorite?
I'm going to charge you for a consulting session. I warned you I would. You're well, an open-ended question, not a yes or no question. Just you say, here's our favorite 3. Tell me more. That's fantastic. You do that with your spouse. You're going to have a happy evening. Tell me more, honey. And you look at them and your heart is open. Or you can say, now, why do you suppose that happened? And then when you get braver, you say, wow, Marianne, can you flip that? That's what you do later on. She gets used to the idea of flipping. Oh, yeah, I can do that. She flips it. Marianne, tell me what the opposite of that is. No, Marianne, hold on to that. We got somebody back here who wants to be heard. Okay, Harry, you're going to tell Marianne what the opposite of that is? And he says, blah, blah, blah. And Marianne says, it's not it. This is it. These are questions that are oblique, that are non-directive, but that indicate your interest in hearing what they have to say. No judgment. I mean, these are very simple, and folks who talk about psychological safety will talk about this, but use them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know you've,
What did I say that was helpful to you?
so that right there is a good example of another one of those questions that you have as part of your arsenal. And I think that,
You mean when I said, what does that mean to you? When
well,
I
yeah,
said that to
just a
you?
reflection, right? It was a reflective, like, was there some learning that happened there? And again, I think that, at least some of the people that listen to our podcast here are people who are charged with not just doing improvements on their own, but helping facilitate. So they find themselves in a coaching, mentoring type role a lot of times, trying to bring people along. And so, asking the right questions, and you've got some real zingers in terms of questions. What do I need to know? What do I need to share? And, what is missing? And some of those things that I think are just, brilliant and on my list of questions to have ready as well.
And
Well, Gwendolyn, there's so much, I love chatting with you. There's so much
Yeah,
fun
ditto.
stuff that we could get into. For somebody who wants to follow up and learn more about this stuff, what's the best place for them to find you or to find more of your information?
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to say that my work is to help companies make visual transformations. That usually begins with the shop floor, but if they're good there, then we move to supervisors or leadership. So that's our active practice. But because we feel so wealthy in the richness of our own discoveries, we have a website that currently has 50 podcasts, but will soon have about another 200. A radio show that I did. They're very interesting, and you've been listening to them for years, and they're educational. They are the methodologies. They are the methodologies that we have not spoken of today, but we've touched upon. There are also lots of videos. We have a YouTube channel that's called, I believe it's called Gwendolyn Galsworth. We have 150 articles. We have my books, Visual Thinking and The Yellow Book, Work That Makes Sense. And then the other 3 books that I haven't written yet. But there's also another 4 books.
How can we access those books that you haven't?
Yeah, so you'll find them on the website, and they're also available on Amazon. If you do buy on Amazon or anywhere you buy it, please put up a review so that people are encouraged to learn more because you learned more.
So, Gwendolyn, there's so much that we could have spoken about today. I would love to have you come back, and I'm certain that there's some questions that I should have asked you that we didn't get a chance to get to, but maybe we could give the listeners a reason to come back and listen to our next episode. What are some of the things that I should have asked you that we didn't have time to get to today?
What a great question. I actually was thinking about this, so I do have a kind of ready answer. I think one of the things we have to make very clear is the difference between visual management, which is misnamed if it represents all of visuality. Visual management is 10%. And to talk about that versus visual performance. I think that's really important, that visual management has a place, but it isn't everything. And if you think that it is, you're missing 90% of what visuality can produce. I think that we could certainly talk about visual quality, including visual standards. We could talk about the infrastructure, the improvement infrastructure that a company needs if they want to keep going, whether it's with visuality or continuous improvement. But there needs to be certain tools and norms in place. And I'm very clear about that. That would be a show all by itself. There are 7 of those. We could talk about case studies.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your
We had a good time, didn't we?
wealth of knowledge. There's an Isaac Newton quote that is, "If I've seen further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants." And for me, you're definitely one of those proverbial giants. And I love to hear the stories of some of the giants whose shoulders you stand on to come up with this wisdom. And so I really appreciate you joining us. I would love to have you come back and do another session. So much.
I'll say yes. It's a pleasure as well.
Wonderful.
Okay.
This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire. KPI Fire is continuous improvement software. KPI Fire helps you align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people, all in one powerful software platform. So whether you're leading a team or transforming an entire organization, KPI Fire is your partner in achieving breakthrough results. You can learn more at KPI Fire. That concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us on the socials and share the podcast with friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change.